Now that Kathy Creator has created all of the database tables in Fairy SQL, it is time to get Cinderella's data into the tables, and once it's in there, continue to make sure the data is updated and correct. Enter Inga Inserter and Manny Maintenance. Inga is the team member who inserts the data into the database tables that Kathy created, and Manny is the team member who updates and deletes the data as needed. Today we'll talk a little more about what they do. After today's lesson, you will be able to write a SQL command to get data into the database, just like Inga, and get data updated or deleted in the database, just like Manny. On her first day at the kingdom, Cinderella showed Inga the massive room full of golden crates filled with data. Inga's mouth dropped, but she soon composed herself. She knew she could get all of the data into the database, but she would need to do some planning. She first asked to be introduced to Kathy Creator. Kathy provided Inga with a map of the tables and fields that she had created in the database. Inga thanked Kathy profusely and then started step 2. With the database schema from Kathy, Inga began organizing the data on the cards based on the table diagrams Kathy had given her, filled with the table and column names. Once Inga had gone through all of the note cards and organized the data based on Kathy's tables, she was ready to insert the data into the database. So she would open up Fairy SQL, select the Cinderella 1 schema, and pull up the new command screen. Here is the shell of an insert command. It starts with the words insert into. This is followed by the table name where the data is going. This is followed by the specific column names that you are going to put the data into. This is followed by the word values, and then the actual values of the data that you are entering into that table under those specific column names. Let's take a closer look at that insert statement with a sample row of data that Inga has organized. So here's the sample row. We have subject ID of 4, first name Giselle, last name Pretty Duma, date of birth 7/1/2000, gender female, marital status single, tagline a princess and an evil queen short of a fairy tale, address is 1 Happily Ever After Lane, and active subject equals yes. So Inga knows this information goes in the subjects table. And she knows the column names and she has the data. So if we remember that insert statement, it starts with the words insert into, followed by the table name. So the table name in this case is subjects. Then we have the column names. So in the example shell, we only have 3 column names, but we actually have 9 column names. So subject ID we want to fill in, first name, last name, date of birth, gender, marital status, tagline, address, and active subject. Write it like this. These are all the columns that we want to put data under. Then we actually fill in the values. So we have the word values, followed by the specific values of 4, Giselle, Pretty Duma, 7/1/2000. So that would look like here, this. And then we would be able to hit submit. And then that data would go into the database. Inga followed these steps of organizing the data she found on the cards based on Cinderella's stacks of data until the subjects table was filled with data. She also filled in the other tables, but only went back to parties that occurred less than a year ago. So after a few days, all of the data from the crates was now in the Fairy SQL database, and all was well in the kingdom. Until, dun dun dun, Cinderella came to Inga in a tizzy. Cinderella was so upset because she had just received a note in the mail from her wicked stepsister. It read, "Hey Cinder Girl, hope you are enjoying your perfect life. I heard you moved all of your data into your ridiculous Fairy SQL database. Hopefully you get just the ever after you deserve. Love, the rightful Prince Charming. P.S. Who's the fairest in the land now?" Cinderella knew that her stepsister was up to something and had a feeling she had done something bad to her data. Inga told Cinderella not to fret. They could review all of Inga's diagrams with the data that had been inserted into the system, and if Cinderella could identify the bad data, Inga knew just the person who could make it right. So Cinderella and Inga looked through all of Inga's diagrams and identified the rows of bad data. Here is one of the rows of bad data they identified. Subject ID 75's name was listed as Cinder Girl. This is what Cinderella's stepsister always called her so nastily. She saw her stepsister had made her gender to male and gave her a mean tagline. Cinderella shook her head in anger. She couldn't believe her stepsister. This is what Inga's insert statement had looked like when she had entered the data for subject ID 75 into the database. Inga also confirmed with Cinderella that she had entered a different insert statement with Cinderella's real data, so nothing about this row was needed. Cinderella also found subject ID 76 to have extremely odd data. There was only one Anastasia in Cinderella's kingdom, and this was her stepsister. But Charming was not Anastasia's last name, and she certainly did not live at the castle and was no way the fairest in the land. Inga and Cinderella could not find any other insert statements with Anastasia's information, so this row, although inaccurate, just needed to be updated with accurate information and not totally deleted. This is what Inga's insert statement had looked like when she had entered the data into the database originally for subject ID 76. So after Cinderella and Inga looked through all of the data and found all of the suspicious data, they were ready to bring in Mr. Manny Maintenance. Inga let Manny know what had happened regarding her inserting rows of bad data. Inga showed Manny the specific rows of bad data. Manny Maintenance smiled and said, "Piece of cake." Manny rolled up his sleeves and entered Fairy SQL. He selected the Cinderella 1 schema. Now it was time to enter in some commands that would delete the unneeded row with Cinder Girl's data and update Anastasia's row of data. Here is the shell that Manny would use for the delete statement. He would start the delete command with the words delete from, followed by the table name, followed by some words that tell the database which specific rows to delete. So this is what the finished delete statement looked like. Notice Manny identified which row to delete by saying where first name equals Cinder. This would have deleted any rows where the first name is Cinder. Since it is not a common name, the likelihood of accidentally deleting additional rows by mistake was low, but a safer way to write this delete statement would be delete where subject ID equals 75. Remember, subject ID is unique per row in the subjects table, so no other rows would have a subject ID of 75, so this would only delete the one row. Note that after this delete statement was submitted, the row in the database would look like this. The row would totally disappear. Now on to the row with Anastasia's made-up data. Here we are going to use an update statement because the subject ID is right, and the first name is right, and the gender is correct. So the update statement starts with the word update, followed by the table name, followed by the word set. This is followed by the column names, and then the value that the new value should equal. And then just like in the delete statement, we follow this by some words that tell the database which row to put the new values into. So here is what the finished update statement would look like. Update subjects, set last name equals stepsister, DOB equals 4/1/1980, marital status equals single, tagline equals evil jealous stepsister, address equals 13 Spinster Lane, where subject ID equals 76. So here, Cinderella was a bit miffed with her stepsister, so the tagline was a little harsh. Note that after this was submitted, the row in the database would look like this. Some of the fields are the same, but others are different based on the columns that we updated. Okay, so now that we saw what insert, update, and delete statements look like, and why we might need to use them, now it's time for a super fun activity, and then get excited about the next lesson because we are going to go a bit more in depth on getting the data out of the system in all sorts of helpful ways with SQL queries.